We've had quite a few customers where someone on the security team was tasked with just understanding how a certain technology was being used in the company. And what's a better place to start than how people are using the browser? And so being able to show here's the employees that we had using ChatGPT versus Gemini versus Perplexity. Here's how they were using it. Here's the files that were going.
Assemble the council.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Council. Today we are talking with the CEO and founder of KeepAware, Ryan Boerner, about web browser security. We have our next major event coming up on November 8th at the Q2 Stadium in Austin, Texas. Always remember, we're looking for guests for this podcast, and we offer virtual CISO services. Good day and welcome to the Cybersecurity Council podcast. Today our special guest is Ryan Boerner, founder and CEO at KeepAware. Ryan is a persistent builder and security creator. KeepAware is a browser security service that protects employees where they are. Good day, Ryan Boerner. Cybersecurity Council welcomes you. Please say hello to our audience.
Thanks for the intro, Scott. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. It's exciting to see where you and Brian are taking the organization.
Thank you very much. Now, full disclosure, KeepAware is a sponsor at one of our upcoming events, and that's an important event for us. It's our first annual conference, November 8th, Q2 Stadium, right here in Austin, Texas. I'm proud. Just as you alluded to, the Cybersecurity Council is growing up fast. We're holding a conference at a stadium, and your company, KeepAware, will be a part of that event. I'm personally looking forward to seeing the KeepAware logo up on the stadium's big screen. That should be very cool. It's a nice camera and dramatic event. Now, Ryan Boerner, I'd like to tell our audience a little bit about you before we begin. I would like to call you a young entrepreneur. May I do that? And that's a compliment, by the way.
Definitely. There's not really a way to hide that, so go for it.
You've been a software engineer at IBM, Darktrace, Raytheon. You've been a security analyst with Texas A&M. Go Aggies. But your work in the private sector has also been a whirlwind, and I say that, again, as a compliment, because you graduated from Texas A&M, again, Go Aggies, just back in 2019, and by 2022, you were founding KeepAware. You were on the entrepreneurial path. Security and entrepreneurship, those are hard things to combine. You're making it happen. When did you first get the entrepreneur bug?
I'd sort of split it because there's that security piece, of course, which I'd say was more of the bug than the entrepreneur part, which I feel has just been part of my life. I like as early as I can remember drawing comic books with my neighbors so that we could sell them in grade school, to mowing lawns, to when I got in computers around middle school. I taught myself how to program so I could make mods for games, and then quickly realized other people wanted mods for games too, and they wanted me to host the game servers. And so kind of built, side businesses there. In college, I did computer engineering, got into like consumer app development. And so that part's always stuck with me. I'd say the bug really came into play when I got into security about 7 years ago, and really started to learn the network and email security space, and just out of my own frustrations wanted to do something still entrepreneurial, but specific to security.
What inspired KeepAware?
So it's really this background I've been in network and email security. So you mentioned the SOC analyst role at Texas A&M, and then after that I worked as a sales engineer for Darktrace, so still in the NDR network and email security space, and then more recently working for IBM CISO organization for IBM as an enterprise. I've always either worked in the SOC or attached to one. And so dealing with things that get through email and get through the network and ultimately get in front of an employee. And a lot of the frustrations that I had and I saw others have was just not getting a full picture from looking, hours on end into network connections and logs. From there, you see what a device is doing, what the network is doing, but you don't really get a grasp for what an employee did at a point in time that was high risk to the organization. what identities and credentials were disclosed, what files ended up getting shared. And so I remember one incident that took place, and maybe that was the tipping point where the conclusion that the SOC had was, well, we don't know. We think it was this or that. We're just going to have them reset passwords, the employee that is. And that's when I realized the browser is just really a blind spot for a lot of security teams and how they operate today.
I'm glad you're focusing on the browser, but I absolutely want to acknowledge the phenomenon that you just brought up. It's kind of an unspoken secret in the security and security operations community. We may have great visibility, we may have great logging, but we may still be missing understanding. I don't know what happened. And you focused in on the browser component of that. I can solve that part. So tell us a little bit more about KeepAware. Tell us about the company's overall vision and mission.
Yeah. So our vision and mission is to stop people targeted threats. I think the best place to do that is the browser, for exactly the reason that you mentioned. We have a lot of visibility, we have a lot of information, but as it pertains to the workday and decisions that are being made, most of that is happening in the web browser. That's where, take the buzzwords, digital transformation and SaaS sprawl. By definition, SaaS is served in the browser. And so that's how we communicate today. We're even recording today in a browser. I don't know if you have a desktop software, but I'm definitely in a browser tab, right now recording this. So I think that's number one. The second one is definitely an identity challenge, in that because all of these applications are served in the browser, I don't think identity has ever been this nested to your browser than now. Take password managers, take juggling all the different work accounts and personal accounts that you're kind of dealing with in the browser as you use applications. And I think this is sort of the dependency on this third one, which is attackers know this. They know that the browser's used for most of the workday. They know that identities are tightly nested. And so if they can get in front of you in the browser, it's effectively a landscape that they've got full access to show you what they want to show you and trick you into disclosing certain information or sharing certain information with really little scrutiny if they can get past, other tools wrapped around the browser. So KeepAware's core focus today as a product is browser security. We want to deploy across employee browsers, specifically the ones that they want to use, whether it's Chrome or Edge, Firefox, Safari, and provide a level of still additional visibility that the security team can use for that understanding part, but more importantly, a prevention layer and response layer on this application we're using all the time.
Ryan, I like how you framed it. Early, you said SaaS is served in the browser. If you can confront identity and attack surface within the browser, you're closing a big hole for a lot of companies and a lot of users. That's got to be very, very valuable, what you're doing at KeepAware. What are some of the primary features or tools that you're deploying to make that happen?
Yeah, I typically break down that attack surface into two buckets because, of course, the browser touches a lot of different spaces. There's a common thread for some of our customers on what they're implementing. Take zero-day phishing prevention is a key one. But for the most part, each organization is a little different how they're using it. It typically boils down to external threats. How are people trying to get in front of your employees? That's going to be all the different channels that they're trying to distribute links or payloads, or, hey, open this HTML file that ultimately lead to the browser. And then second would be insider risks. So there still are these activities that are hard to govern. Take, Dropbox as an example. It would be really easy if you could just block Dropbox. And some companies are able to do that, but there's these file sharing services that they might need to open up so that employees can do work with partners and clients. But the context of a Dropbox environment could wildly change from a corporate environment to a personal environment to a free trial of a corporate environment. And you might want to behave differently as a security team based on that context and employees in. And those are just not controls that you get over the network. Really, the only place you can see that context is within the browser. And so I bring up those two buckets because our platform ultimately is to enable security operations for the browser. There's a visibility piece where we show any browser-based activity, whether it's upload, page visit, copy paste events that are sensitive, credential use, downloads, extension activities. There's a whole range of these. But then on top of it, provide that enforcement layer where you could write detections and look for a very specific activity that you don't want happening in the environment and put a response on top of it. So I frame it as very much a detection engineering tool for the browser, where you get both that visibility component, but then you can write detections on top of it for both governance and putting in policy, but then also investigations and the response after the fact.
Now, you are a CEO founder, but you're still a maker, right? You're still hands on keyboard. You're still doing the detection engineering. You're making your product sharper every day. Is that
Definitely. I've managed to split the schedule a little bit because the workday, I'd say I'm our primary sales engineer. So I like working with customers. I like giving demonstrations, talking about use cases, but I'll still find time to program a bit if I can.
I'd like to jump ahead. I have a question intended for you at the end of this interview where I was going to ask you to share with us your maker schedule versus your management schedule. How do you think through your day and your priorities? Well, you just brought us here. So how do you do it?
Yeah, so again, the sales engineer, I'd say, is my day job. So if I can work on an integration with a client, or I can give a demonstration for the sales team, this is how I like to spend my day. I like to be a resource for the rest of the team if I can. And I've realized, like, my own programming, I'm probably not the best on the team at this point. I hope I'm not. And so I need a good 4-hour block if I'm gonna like actually contribute as a maker, and that's just not possible if I want to be interfacing with customers. And so when I make time for that, it's usually in the evenings or weekends to contribute to code where I can. But I'd say for the most part, where I'm actually contributing to product is what customers are saying around integrations and deployment efficiencies. And things that I was doing as a sales engineer, at when I worked at Darktrace.
I'd like to lean on your technical capabilities. Where is the rocket science within the KeepAware product? Not just where are your differentiators, but where is your technology a step ahead of the competition?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just coming from the network space, there's proven ways to operate detections and policy over the network. You've got a couple different methods. You could use IOCs to look at DNS records and block certain sites. If you're a little bit deeper, you're looking at packet headers. If you're looking deeper in that, you're decrypting the individual files that are being transmitted from server to client. The browser's completely different story. It's piecing all of this together in its own document object or DOM object for browser use. So analyzing this model is a lot different than analyzing individual network connections or decrypting traffic. And so that's where we really shine, is that we have analysis and detections directly in the DOM tree as the browser is building it in your page. And that allows us to see things that otherwise wouldn't be seen over the network. Think one attack style is browser in the browser, which is someone crafting through CSS and JavaScript and HTML a fake browser window inside your browser to convince you that you're logging in with a Google sign-in or a Microsoft sign-in when you have those flows. But it's all within this canvas, within this page. You can only see that if you're sitting in the page with that behavior. And so that analysis piece, and specifically DOM tree analysis, is where I think a lot of our secret sauce, if you will, is sitting. And the second one's tied to the browser as well, which is how do we enforce policy? Typically over the network, if you want to enforce policy, you block the connection. Well, this case I mentioned with like the difference between a personal Dropbox and a corporate one, that's an in-tab type of behavior. And so being able to provide point in time notices and safeguards on the page itself while you're in that interaction, I think is another place where we really differentiate ourselves.
I'd like to return to big picture. Where is KeepAware right now? What has the year 2024 looked like for you? What do the next 6 months look like?
We're a seed stage startup. And so a lot of what we've been doing is proving specific use cases with design partners and clients and ultimately building a platform that integrates well with existing security operations. So take, SIM, SOAR, EDR, other technologies that you would want to tie into where the browser is sitting. That's been our core focus as a product team. And then, commercially, it means finding the clients that you want to work with and that want to work with you and provide a lot of feedback, both good and bad, to improve the product. And then the next 6 months for us is really starting to build awareness around KeepAware as a brand. At this point, we've built a platform. We have renewals coming as a seed stage company that are exciting to see, that people just really love the product, and it's so nested into their system that it's becoming like an integral part of their stack. And so now we're trying to use those relationships to communicate that value to more people, of course.
Testimonials and engagements, my friend. I appreciate what you're doing. Where are you seeing traction? Where are you hoping to see traction as you grow in the next 6 to 12 months?
Traction today is it's sporadic, but it usually comes back to a core set of personas or organization behaviors. Is that you have organizations where most of their workforce is in a browser day in and day out. Most of their operations are taking place there. And where I think we've done particularly well is the businesses that are transacting business to business all the time. So the ones that I think of are the financial services, accounting services, insurance is a huge one, law firms where you have attorneys constantly dealing with attorneys at other firms. Because of these workers, they're using a lot of SaaS applications to do business. And it always is interesting for us to see in a particular organization how much of their own tools that they're using for work, their own licensing versus the licensing of their partners or their clients that they work with. I think that naturally causes a huge sprawl of what a company and an IT security team has to worry about. And so I think that's where we've done particularly well.
I was recently in a CISO, acting CIO role at a startup. And in a few short years, we added like 45, 50 software partners and vendors and third parties. And I would say that was actually a low number because we were consolidating the tech stack as we were going. Here's my question to you. It's a little bit of a thought experiment. Let's say I'm the CISO. I walk into my security operations center and I ask my security analyst, hey, what is KeepAware telling us like over the last 30 days? What are like the top two things that security analyst is going to turn around and tell me?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would split the capabilities into sort of two parts on this. If you're talking to a security analyst, the go-to is here's everything we've effectively been able to catch or restrict in the environment. This is more of that kind of point in time detection and response where this is happening day in and day out. When we first started as a company, I had a Slack channel that would feed us alerts when this happened across clients. We've hit a scale now where that's impossible, and our family members hate us if we're, seeing these Slack messages come in, over the weekend and things like that. So I can't do that anymore, but I'd say that's the number one kind of piece of reporting that a security analyst would have is these browser-based activities that we've prevented based on our own detections and patterns that we've sent out to customers, but also their own and what's important to their organization. The second part is what I've seen more and more recently, I think because of of course, like AI tools is going to be a key example here, where we've had quite a few customers where someone on the security team was tasked with just understanding how a certain technology was being used in the company. And what's a better place to start than how people are using the browser? And so being able to show, here's the employees that we had using ChatGPT versus Gemini versus Perplexity. Here's how they were using it. Here's the files that were going. And so this type of reporting, I'd say, is becoming extremely popular, as we've seen companies which you would have never guessed that a city government would form an AI committee, particularly at the size I'm thinking of, but the number of companies that are starting to really form their own policy around this is exciting, but it also means they have to understand what people are doing today. So I'd say that's a second piece of reporting that a security analyst would have.
Web browser security versus endpoint protection. Take me through some of the shared responsibility, differentiate those two for me.
Right. So I think this comes back to the identity point, is that identity is very tightly nested with the browser. And so I would think endpoint security is, what is the endpoint doing? What is the endpoint doing that we don't want it to do, and putting a stop to that. Basically, you could say the same is true with the browser, except the difference is most of what happens in the browser is driven by the employee or the human behind the screen. And so you're looking at a different threat model there. What can end up on a device in terms of processes and permissions is very much different than what decisions an employee could be making in their web browser to disclose information or share identity or adopt new software. And so I think they're very tightly nested when you get into what can we block on the network level, because they both have a little bit of overlap there. But I'd say that the big difference is, what is the device doing versus what is the employee doing.
There have been a lot of major breaches this year. I'm thinking about CrowdStrike, I'm thinking about AT&T, I'm thinking about Ticketmaster, but the list is very, very long. Can you point to any recent breach where you think your product, KeepAware, may have saved the day? I realize we are speculating. Feel free to bring yourself, but where do you think you might have been a difference maker?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely no silver bullet, and I'll be the first to say that. With just where we sit, we try to own one piece of this puzzle. One game that we play in our Slack as a company is that we have attachments to RSS feeds that come in, and we'll share these like headline breaches. And the game is, did the browser appear in the skill chain before we click the link and like read the article? And 9 times out of 10, if it's something that impacted the endpoint, the browser was a piece of the puzzle and could have had an influence over that. I'd say the two that come to mind, definitely like the Okta situation, where you had an employee saving corporate passwords, or it somehow got synced to the personal version of that, which got compromised. And this like personal work identity overlap, I think, is a huge issue. It's only going to be getting worse with the development of new tools and technologies, where I'll throw ChatGPT as a good example here. They release as a consumer product. Then very quickly they have a corporate and a Teams version of this product, but they're all housed under the same chatgpt.com. And so balancing personal and work identities with an application like that, I think is sort of the norm with new SaaS today. So that's one that comes to mind. I think starting with which employees are doing that to begin with, and where are saved passwords going, where are people auto-filling information from, and then being able to put governance on employees' browsers through that. The second one is that comes to mind. There's been a couple organizations hit with it, is more of the zero-day phishing, MFA replay type phishing attacks, where even MFA did not prevent this because they're effectively proxying and relaying that behind the scenes. So MFA replay, these are kits that are being used, but they're effectively customized to the organization. We've seen some that will take company branding, the background on Microsoft 365. They'll go buy a previously registered domain name that looks similar to the organization, and then they'll host these sites to employees. And unless you block that over the network, which again, a lot of these tools can't because of just the layer of inspection that they have outside of the browser, you wouldn't tell this was a phishing page. And just adding that replay component behind it for MFA just in some cases will completely destroy that as a safeguard.
That's incredibly wonderful to hear. I've been with an organization that has had MFA replay problems. So just knowing that you have an ability or at least an enhanced opportunity to defeat that particular access vector, that is very good to know. Thank you. On the broader level, how are you attending to emerging threats, new risks, new vectors?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to how we initially designed our platform. It took over a year of us being in production environments to add some sort of IOC factor to our solution, meaning until more recently, we didn't have any sort of threat feeds coming into our tool. I think that kind of relying on those, it ends up being a race. Not that they're not good, but you're ultimately ending up having to see how many of these domains, locations, IP addresses you can add before someone gets in front of an employee. And so when we initially designed the tool, it was really more around the behavior of what was happening on the page. Layman's terms is if a page is asking you for a password and no one else in the company has logged into this app or this site before, that's a pretty big red flag and would catch most phishing without even knowing what domain was serving this type of site. And so all that to say, we approach our solution in layers where we can apply these broad patterns and behaviors that we could prevent individual actions like a credential use event for this highly abnormal situation. But then we also put kits and things on top. Take an example where someone could take a phishing kit that they distribute phishing through, like a Canva or one of these free sites that they can host redirects on. They might distribute, 100,000 versions of this. And if you're trying to block that over the network, you're going to have to go find each one of those unique URLs or domain names that are being used to distribute this kit. If we can create a pattern for just that single kit, it doesn't matter how many sites you distribute this on. It's gonna recognize that someone's claiming to be a Google sign-in page, and we know you're not on Google.com. So situations like that, I think, have helped us capture a lot of things that honestly we didn't intend to begin with, and new and novel threats that we blocked and said, why did we block this? Oh yeah, it's because of this behavior. Let's go build a brand or build a specific detection around that.
I like what you are offering here. I'd like to illustrate a couple of things that come from my own experience. So at the end of this, Ryan, I'm going to ask you to make me smarter. During my experiences being a CISO, acting CIO, in charge of corporate IT, my company was a Microsoft company. The Microsoft tech stack would give me opportunities to block or not block certain types of websites, etc. And that might be all of the control that it gives me. There's nothing more specific. I have to be assured by Microsoft's under the hoods smarts to make sure that they are getting this right and they are being more sophisticated about it. I am guessing that KeepAware, because of the behavioral capabilities and the logic that you say you've designed into it, goes many steps farther. Would that be right?
Definitely. And it comes back to this detection engineering approach where for a single activity like a page visit happening in the environment, there's 200 to 300 fields that we're pulling back that can be used by the security team to write a detection on top of that. You end up with these situations where you can create an extremely nuanced policy to say, I want to prevent the copy or paste of this specific type of information on this specific app by this specific employee. And you could do that with uploads, downloads, and any in-tab, what I'll say, activities, as opposed to just the site blocking or the broader stroke categories, which of course, like there's that capability too, and it serves as a decent baseline in a lot of ways. But a lot of the challenges with SaaS and again identity come back to these really specific scenarios where companies have been caught.
Has KeepAware been in any scenarios where you have had to report a CVE or work with a browser manufacturer to address something?
We haven't yet. Where we've seen our outreach is mostly with SaaS vendors. So we'll see when attackers are using their platforms to distribute phishing or social engineering attacks, and almost at a rapid pace, we'll create reports that we're ultimately sending to, I'll take like Dropbox as an example. And this is how someone's kind of abusing your platform and the freemium features of that platform to distribute effectively phishing and social engineering attacks.
Deep respect to you for doing that. And I hope that these SaaS companies are accepting your feedback and returning on the investment that you're giving them. In other words, I hope
Right.
they're remediating based on your recommendations.
Well, I'd say I wish I had the time to do that, but that's definitely more of the threat research group on our team. So I'll relay that positive feedback.
Tell me a little bit about your team. How have you built your team over the last couple of years? What did you prioritize? Who did you hire first? Walk us through your mind space here.
Yeah, so I started this company with my co-founder I met 8 years ago, Noah Schaefer. He's our CTO, and he ultimately helped me with a lot of projects that were not cybersecurity related. And so both of us are kind of coming into this with, limited knowledge of the space, which I think has helped us build a more employee focused solution, if you will, where when blocks and things happen, we're thinking a lot more about what a consumer is kind of going through, and how that relates back to the security team. But in general, team building, it was really just us. And then everything past that and building our group has been the thing that I'm either struggling to do or spending a lot of time on doing. And how can I bring in someone who knows that space a little bit better than I do, or a lot better than I do to take that work? And so some of our first hires were that, full stack engineering to build out the console, build out the platform, threat research, which I love doing with my SOC background, but just there's about half of the threats that I think we've seen in environments that we anticipated because of things we saw at prior companies. But since sitting in the browser, there's so many things that we see through malvertising that we just didn't know of in the past that are being abused by attackers in the browser, where having a constant function in your company to develop and push out, newly created threats to customers is important. So that's one area. Then, of course, I'm no salesperson, marketer, and I mean that as a compliment, and that it's a lot of work, and bringing people on my team that are a little bit better at that was one of the earliest decisions that I made. So generally, it's been, where the team has been bandwidth constrained or skill constrained, and I think that's only going to continue as we continue to grow.
I suspect you have a motivated and technically savvy team. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you're sending a team member to present at the Florida B-Side soon. That may have already even happened by the time this recording comes out. But you're very fortunate to have team members that are at that level of presenter. Are there other security events that KeepAware normally does?
Our strategy has kind of been broken into two parts. Of course, with threat research, you're wanting to get in front of operators and people that have these challenges like we did before we started KeepAware. So B-Sides, of course, is a great way to do that. There are a few other, meetups around Austin and where a threat researcher is located that we can kind of share insights on the space here. I'd say the second part of being at events is just building brand awareness with CISOs and security leaders. What we're hearing more and more from them is that, it's great that we know of your brand, but if my team's not saying a word about it, it's probably not a priority for them. And so kind of taking that two-pronged approach is what's been working for us.
To approach CISOs and other people that have buying authority and executive mandates to choose your product, that's always important. But you just described the grassroots campaign. Get the operators, get the analysts engaged with KeepAware, make sure they know its values, its benefits, and they've seen it have constructive value in the field. So I'm hopeful that you are having success with that. You're going to need it to get beyond the seed stage. But I know you're already having traction. We discussed a little bit of that beforehand. Would you be willing to disclose who some of your early adopters have been, or at least just tell me about their industries and sizes and scopes?
Yeah. So our earliest adopters were folks that I reached out directly to on LinkedIn and asked to take a demo. And so in terms of industry, it's quite spread in that in the early days, I just wanted to get someone to see what we were doing. I'd say we've had the benefit of working with a few law firms, engineering and design services. One that comes to mind is a company called One Workplace. They have a few thousand employees and they work internationally across several brands. They provide architecture, engineering, and design furniture services for a lot of the Fortune 100 companies where you have these giant campuses and interiors being built. And what's interesting about them, in the same way I mentioned with this business work, they're having to work with these clients, but they're working across marketing, sales, engineering, design, architecture. So there's a lot of SaaS that they've got to use as a part of their work, and most of their employees are working in a browser day in and day out.
I think it's interesting that the first early adopter you brought up was law firms. Law firms have confronted generative AI in ways that at a scale and volume that many companies aren't facing. They've become a source of technology dynamism in our culture, which I wasn't expecting. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said that. But I'm coming across interviews with technology leads for law firms now. These folks are in the know. They've pivoted their entire organizations, top to bottom, consolidated their tech stacks. It doesn't surprise me that they, along with engineering and design, were some of your early adopters. I am unsurprised, and that is a compliment to the law firms out there that have been able to pivot. Can you share any success stories?
I think one that comes to mind came out of an evaluation where, typically when we evaluate, this is a really simple technology. You can deploy it to existing browsers. Employees aren't prompted, they don't receive a notice. And so in a lot of our evaluations, people are pushing this out just so that they can, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, just understand how employees are using the browser. It's not every evaluation that will see a critical, 0-day threat in the environment, but the one I'm thinking of in particular was a Microsoft specific phishing page where they made it past the email filter. They presented this link to an employee. They had bought and registered a domain name that looked very similar to the company's. They used their company branding on this login Microsoft page. It was registered a day and a half before we started the POC. Just like the timing of the situation was very interesting and honestly beneficial to us because we were able to highlight and even stop that in the moment phishing page being presented to the employee. But I think it serves as this example where you will always have this like widespread phishing capability that folks have because of kits and because of just the pure automation at play today that is so cheap to use. But where I'm seeing the biggest difference for us is these really nuanced, specific attacks against the organization and specific employees within that organization, that because of our detection and more of the behavior-based approach, we're able to step in and block those. So that's one that comes to mind. That they're a current happy customer. They've implemented plenty of use cases on top of that now, but that was one of those first wow moments for us as a team where like, okay, there's something here.
Talk to me a little bit about responding to a new threat. You have a new threat detection. Take me through the detection engineering so you can get a block or a workaround or a solution out into the field. How much time does it take you to do that? And how are you accelerated by, as you described earlier, you've already designed your product to be ready to embrace the changes?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it comes in various forms. So there's vulnerabilities that the browser vendors may get exposed so that people can know that these exist and they have an update lifecycle. And so there's more of this. We're looking at news in the same way that a security team is, and that's a decent amount of patterns that we'll make that are more specific. One that comes to mind is like the 0000 day vulnerability, where a browser is able to effectively call local devices. So those are coming out of like specific requests, whereas most of what we design is from our own detection patterns, meaning we have detections that are running across all of our clients, across industries, that are these broader stroke abnormalities, I'll call them. And so we have a threat research process that will effectively inspect these a level deeper, understand why something was flagged with a certain level of risk. It might not be a threat. If an employee is logging into an application for the first time, that's not necessarily a threat. It's just something that might require a further lens or look into. And that becomes part of our threat research lifecycle, we call it, where we take a further look, see if it's flagging certain indicators like claiming to be a login page, claiming to have Microsoft or Google branding, or some of these that we acknowledge or look for. And then ultimately, if it warrants a detection on top of it, and most of these are labeling risk in environments, we could develop something that's more specific to a particular threat group or campaign, and then push that out to customers almost instantly, where they can retroactively see them on top of the existing indicators or detections that were already in their environment. And so again, it's this layered approach where we have a lot of these behavioral patterns out, either labeling risk or providing little pauses to employees in just abnormal situations. And then if we see trends or campaigns on top of that, we can form more nuanced detections like the Microsoft 365 branding example on top of it, and push that as just another campaign or detection to customers.
That's an excellent answer. You took us all the way from inception to getting something published to the field. What's on your technology roadmap? How will KeepAware be expanding or changing or embracing new features here soon?
Yeah, come back to that mission, which is to stop people targeted threats. It's so when I consider, where those are at, we look at the browser as being a large part of that, but it's really only one interface that we work in. Take email, take other communication channels, take mobile, for example. And so I think as a platform, we sort of joke internally that the best way that we're going to be a browser security company is actually how we operate outside of the browser. The browser can only do so many things. And so once you have a good detection layer on top of it, enforcement layer, now it's about how we integrate with the rest of the environment, both on the security side, but also on the employee side, and integrating with other tools like the email client, or like the mobile device that they're using. And for us as a company, that's kind of going back to the name KeepAware. It's about the employees and the people. not as much any particular technology.
That next great employee that's headed towards KeepAware, how do they get you to notice them? What is something that they could do out there in the field so that Ryan Boerner says, I want to interview that person?
The generation that I'm in is that kind of the personal brand is a lot more important than any sort of company that you're tied to. And so how you present yourself professionally online, if you choose to do so, is something that I look pretty heavily into, even down to like commits on GitHub. Are they kind of proud of their work and sharing things that they think is important? Same with LinkedIn. Are they engaged with other professionals in the industry? So those are more behavior based things that I look into. I'd say characteristic wise, I've never been a people manager outside of KeepAware. I've never hired a person outside of KeepAware. So a lot of what I've kind of designed in our company, our system, I've relied on advisors and some of our investors to give me feedback. And what I've found is that if someone has EQ or emotional intelligence, IQ, they have grit and they have integrity to, say what they do and do what they say. Those are the 4 things that I personally look for. And if I can evaluate those, in our interview cycles and same with the team, that person has a really good chance of working with us.
Thank you, Ryan Boerner. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing KeepAware with us today. The Cybersecurity Council is very proud to have had you as a special guest. We're looking forward to seeing you and your team on November 8th. If there's anything we can do to support you, we are happy to do that. So again, Ryan, thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Scott. I've enjoyed it.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Council. This council strives to showcase unique cybersecurity leadership stories. Its mission is to demystify and simplify cybersecurity across the entire business landscape. Best practices, lessons learned, operational recommendations, it's all here. Brought to you by the Cybersecurity Council, LLC, Brian Green and myself, Scott Brammer, will be your hosts. We have come in from the cyber wilderness, not just to share what we have learned, but to find and elevate some of the most important voices in cyber. Brian is a former Division I college football player who has experience across many cybersecurity software startups. He has a successful exit on his resume too. He's also the founder and president of this very community, the Cybersecurity Council. Myself, Scott Brammer, I'm a former Marine and active CISO, and I have 3 patents in cyber and risk. As hosts, we are here to elevate best practices and strengthen the cyber community, both for the community itself and its allies. The Cybersecurity Council has had auspicious beginnings here in the Austin, Texas community, but we are already going worldwide. Everyone should be a cyber practitioner. The views expressed on this podcast, either by us or by our guests, are our own, and they do not necessarily reflect the view of our organizations. This podcast is intended as a forum for professional knowledge, but it is not legal or regulatory advice. Always consult your legal professionals for legal and regulatory matters. And now,
assemble the council.